everybody was upset because they don't have the money. We got that. But you can't justify what you're doing to everybody else. Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, that's not such a nice job, but you guys got a little bit more money, but all your basic costs go up.
Yeah, you know, so far my unit, the utilities has been pretty well. Okay, most of the time.
Oh yeah, yeah, I like that. Would you sign it? Would you sign it?
There's a consolation.
West Joseph.
David, would you like the big one?
Okay, sure. Sure. I don't even know if I can read this one yet. So it needs to be twice as big.
Yeah, if you're making money, you're cutting costs.
Yeah, see, my you know, my unit pays all utilities. So it's, you know, $40 million a year. If I use something that drops our price of gas by, it's like
Sure.
it's huge. And so it's fortunate. We have a lot of people. Yeah, but we've been, it's amazing. So, you know, the last 5 years, we've been going with all these projects. We kind of keep them off the books, you know, because they're standing on their own bucket. But just, I don't know whether we were just terribly inefficient to begin with. I think that's a lot of it. It's just as astounding. You're going to water. It's crazy to answer here with all of that.
That Microsoft Surface, and since I couldn't get water to open up, I saved it to my portable hard drive. Okay, that worked out. That opened up. Okay, one more.
I was going to say, you don't have an iPad.
Okay, there we go. I got them all.
Yeah, I printed them.
Oh, that's.
Although for us, you know, the water conservation, it's the same goal. 5% of our costs is chemical and electricity, the rest of it's all labor. You know, it's the same whether we don't look at the water. As we conserve water, you know, the unit costs.
Well, I started printing it out only to realize after I'd gone through the first stack like that, I'm going, holy crap. Jim, will you stop disrupting stuff? See, now you got her all wound up. She's going to be laughing at you all morning.
Okay. I'll talk after this or next time.
Yeah, I'm going to take it down and show you where it is.
Yeah, because I did talk to Ken. Anyway, sometimes the sequence of the conversations is weird. Depends on these day and age. By the time you hit send, it's all new. Okay, good. Oh, you're talking
see if I was supposed to pick up Mayor Corvoza. I might have.
You're the man here. Yeah. Okay, let's do that.
No, from the public here.
Let's call the meeting to order. And we are absent 2 board members from the city of Davis. One is anticipated to join us. Other agencies are represented by their respective board members or alternates. Bill? All right, thank you. And I think we're going to take some non-action items first in the absence of quorum. So, Dennis? What would be the first one here, the long-range calendar?
Yeah, we could start with the long-range calendar. That's agenda item number 10 in your packet. The main thing that I wanted to bring to the board's attention was dates in September and October. What we're proposing there is dates that are different than the normal third Thursday of the month. And we're also planning to have a recess in August at this point, but as we get into some of the discussions today, we may want to talk about that as well.
Okay.
So this is mostly for the board's information. We do have a lot of activity both today and in July, and then very important decisions following the August recess.
Those change dates in September and, what was it, October and November?
September and October,
September and October, are those dates of any issue to members that are here currently?
they're both proposed 1 week earlier than the normal schedule would call for.
UCD is good.
I haven't studied them, so I'll let you know.
Or perhaps what I suggest, maybe we'll ask Lynn Ann to send out confirmation to all of the board members, and if it works for everybody, we'll make those the new dates.
Okay.
And then I just might move to item number 11. As you see in your packet, there's quite a long list of correspondence, all related to our efforts to secure state matching funds for the intake facility. We were basically able to get letters of support for that funding from all of our elected officials and all of the major stakeholder groups. And I think that was key and instrumental in our getting $10 million included in the budget that the legislature has passed. It's not a trailer bill. It's actually in the legislature approved budget. The next step will be to make sure that it stays in the budget as the governor goes through his review. We're checking on that regularly, but at this point we don't have any sense or indication that we'll have a problem there. So that's extremely good news and a real testament to the regional support that the project has. And I also wanted to personally thank Lynn Ann for running around nonstop to get all these letters in place and over to the appropriate offices in a matter of a couple days.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn Ann, too, and everybody here who participated in signing and ensuring those letters were done.
I think we can also take public comment at this time. Do you have any members of the public wishing to make comment on any items not appearing on the agenda? Seeing none. We could take any reports that any board members wish to make. One thing I'd like to just mention is the RWA. Most of you have probably seen the RWA is undertaking a strategic planning process for a number of years, which, going forward, which will include some legislative advocacy, which RWA has engaged in fairly recently and is engaging in more and more. So Dennis will be, I think, participating in that process on our behalf, and that the outcome of that should be by the end of the summer, I would anticipate. Is that?
And I might just mention, Chair Marble, that on your consent calendar agenda is a requested action to approve changes to the RWA Joint Powers Agreement that allows for the efforts that were just mentioned.
Okay, well, we will recess until we have an additional board member at this point. Okay.
All right.
There he is.
Probably. There he is. Hey, I've been waiting. I've been waiting here. I've been waiting. I'd like to.
Do we have authority as a board to send the bill to Davis for the fine of?
You have the authority to send it, and I have the authority to decide
Okay,
whether to pay.
We're back in session, and we've taken care of public comment. We've taken care of the long-range board calendar, and we've taken care of correspondence. So with that, we need to approve the agenda, do we, Mr. Shanahan?
No changes to the agenda are
Are there any
proposed.
changes to the agenda? Seeing none. Yeah, no, we're good. So we have a consent agenda in front of us. We have a motion to approve. Second? I'll second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency update, Mr. Deemer.
I'd just like to apologize to everybody for my tardiness, unanticipated. It involved an internal combustion engine and a fuel level, and a mistake I have not made in a long time. So, apologies.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Chairman, Marble and board members wanted to give you an update.
Wait a minute. We thought everybody from Davis just rode bikes. What's going on? What are you talking about internal combustion engines for? Okay, Mr. Deemer.
So we've got a lot of activities going on at the agency right now. I wanted to give you a brief overview of the more significant ones, and then several of them are also agendized for further discussion later on in the agenda. We'll go through some of the recent activities and accomplishments, what's upcoming in terms of our milestones, talk a bit about the status of the Dbo procurement, and then finish with cost and schedule. This past April and June, since the last time we met in April, we have prepared a final budget for the board's consideration this afternoon. Also an amendment to the UC Davis agreement for the board's consideration this afternoon. We continue to pursue the Srf loans, both Safe Drinking Water Act loans as well as Clean Water Act Srf loans. So the Safe Drinking Water Act is the potable water side, and the Clean Water is the wastewater side. It looks very favorable for both Srf applications. The Health Department, which runs the Safe Drinking Water Act SRF, has told us that Woodlands project, portion of the project qualifies due to their nitrate contamination problems with their wells. They have told Davis that they would qualify, or they will qualify, if they can go through a consolidation effort, and they've targeted North Davis Meadows as a consolidation that they would like to see take place. We've also made very good progress since our last meeting with the Clean Water SRF. We submitted an initial application. They are very responsive, asked us for follow-up information, and in both cases, they believe that they can fund substantial, if not all, of the project costs. The other very important action that has taken place is the inclusion of $10 million in state matching funds in the state budget that is now being reviewed by the governor. As I mentioned earlier, we're watching that closely to make sure that as the administration reviews the budget, that it stays in place. At this point in time, we have no indications that there are any concerns being raised. Environmental and permitting, we continue efforts on our 404 permit and specifically biological opinions. We did commence sampling for the aerosol study. We had a couple of windy days in the past couple of weeks. We haven't gotten the results yet, but that aerosol study, the effort to monitor what's coming off of the treatment plant and potentially making its way to the water treatment plant site is underway. We continue to work with Reclamation District 2035 on obtaining a portion of their WAPA power for the new intake facility, and also to coordinate with PG&E on what they're going to require in the way of new electrical facilities to serve that new intake facility. We continue work on the remaining easements. Not a lot of progress or activity to report. The list is getting shorter. We have been in contact. You will recall that the agency authorized the retention of a special counsel to work on the Sierra Northern Railroad acquisition, and there have been communications between the parties trying to resolve that matter. We have also had a meeting with Yolo County with Mr. Ben Como regarding the encroachment permit, and had initial discussions about what would be required in the way of road reconstruction or repair following our installation of the raw water pipelines and the treated water pipelines. We have another meeting scheduled in about 7 or 8 days to see if we can't close that issue out. In the next couple of months, we'll obviously continue to pursue the loans. There's ongoing work associated with the development of the ASR program and the development of that program for Well 28 in Woodland. We'll continue the efforts to secure WAPA power. And importantly, you may recall some time ago the board authorized a value for money study, and that's basically a comparison of a risk-adjusted cost comparison between traditional design bid build and design build operate. We've been working on that study. The consultant's actively engaged, and we hope to have that study available for the board in the July timeframe.
Why are we doing that again?
It's to document the choice of the design build operate procurement methodology, and to demonstrate that that method, primarily through transfer of risks to the DBO team that would otherwise be borne by the agency under a traditional design bid build, ends up being cheaper, and the methodology will actually quantify the savings in that risk-based analysis.
Do we have to do that by statute, or?
No, it's something that the procurement committee and our attorneys thought would be valuable to have to defend and explain the DBO procurement choice that we've made.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, if I could just add, Joe, it's not required by statute, but there is a recent recommendation out of the state legislative analyst office who recommends a VFM analysis for agencies doing DBO-type procurement. So that's another reason we're doing it, is consistent with that recommendation.
Great.
You see here, in the next couple of months, we'll continue the activities related to environmental assessments and permitting. I hope to have those wrapped up at around the end of July, around a month or two from now. Land acquisition and right-of-way efforts will continue. And under planning, design, and construction, we anticipate receiving the priced DBO proposal on July 30th. So let me talk now about the design, build, operate contract procurement and the status and what's happened since we last met in April. We did receive initial concept submittals from both of our DBO teams, from CH2M Hill and CDM. Our team of experts reviewed the submittals and their submitted proposed phased procurement plan, and the board will recall that that's a plan that they had to lay out for us that demonstrated how they were going to competitively price the subcontracted work, approximately 70% of the work, and how they were going to do that in an open and transparent and inclusive fashion, and then also how they were going to show us how they were going to price the remaining 30% of the work that was going to be self-performed. So they both submitted plans, and we have reviewed those plans. We met with both teams to review their concept submittal proposals. As a result of those meetings, we have prepared a second addendum to the RFP, and that's on your calendar later in the agenda. It clarifies questions from the individual meetings, and it modifies the RFP in those areas where there were common requests for both of the teams. So following up on the concept submittal proposals, we sent CH2M Hill a letter with questions and seeking clarification, and we got appropriate and satisfactory feedback from them. We also approved their phased procurement plan, their procurement plan for the subcontracted and open book part of the work. With CDM, we sent them a letter noting deficiencies in their submittal. The deficiencies were not corrected in the team response or through contacts with references. We had identified the deficiencies and then followed up with their references. We're unable to confirm that their processes met our requirements through those contacts. And so we sent a letter to CDM noting that their concept submittal was not in compliance. Yesterday morning, we received notice from CDM that they are withdrawing from the competition. So looking at where we are in the overall procurement process, I think it's very important to note that this has been a 2.5-year competitive process. We started this process 2.5 years ago. We issued an RFQ. We had 5 firms that submitted. We narrowed those 5 submittals to 3 shortlisted teams. And the process has worked as designed. We've narrowed the list to 1 final, highly qualified team. We got there about 5 weeks earlier than our schedule called for. And 2 of the 3 bidders removed themselves from consideration. You'll recall Veolia withdrew because of the impacts and delays of the procurement schedule, and CDM because they are unable to correct the deficiencies in their submittal and comply with our RFP requirements. And you'll recall they also have difficulty, expressed difficulty in meeting the price ceiling guarantees that we've established as part of the process. So with 1 remaining qualified team, it does allow us potentially to begin negotiations ahead of schedule, and it will save the agency approximately $500,000. You'll recall that we had included a pre-designed fee of $250,000 that would have been awarded to a team that submitted a responsive proposal but was not selected. So we will obviously not have to pay that $250,000. In addition, we will not have to review a second submittal with our team of experts and attorneys, and we'll save time and hopefully be able to move the process forward more quickly. So just to remind the board regarding the competitive provisions that we have incorporated into our procurement process, there is a maximum cost ceiling that the bidders are required to meet in order to ensure competitiveness both for the capital cost as well as the long-term operating costs. And the board will recall over the process of refining the RFP, we have lowered the capital cost ceiling by 20% compared to what the engineer's estimate was originally. We were requiring open book competition and pricing, competitive pricing, for 70% of the work that's going to be completed by subcontract. And as I mentioned earlier, all of the remaining self-performed work is going to be subject to an open book process. This is an example. Just this past Wednesday, yesterday, CH2M Hill, in accordance with their phased procurement plan, did hold an open house, 1 in Davis and 1 in Woodlands, soliciting interest from subcontractors. So they are already in the process of implementing their phased procurement plan, which has been approved. This is a schedule for the Dbo Procurement. It goes back a little bit further than what we've been showing you, but again, just to emphasize that this process has been underway for 2.5 years. We started with a request for qualifications back in January of 2011. We shortlisted to 3 teams in June. We issued the request for proposals this past December. We did receive 2 concept submittals from the 2 remaining teams in May, and we are still anticipating the submittal of a fixed price or a priced proposal with the guaranteed price from CH2M Hill, July 30th. If all goes according to plan, we would be back to the board requesting authorization to proceed in the August or September timeframe, and still anticipate being able to bring to the board a recommendation for a contract award in October. Any questions on the DBO process and where we stand before I go on?
Yes, I guess I would like, thanks, Bill. I guess I would like to go back to slide 12. And I'm not, I'm not surprised necessarily, nor am I necessarily disappointed by this, because I think we built in lots of contingencies along the way to make sure that if we did end up in this situation with one final submission, we would still be very comfortable with that because of the sub-bidding going on and the price caps. But I do think we should be careful about the third bullet's title, and I'm not sure how that can be revised, but I'm not sure, that's not exactly what the design was. I mean, the design was to get 3 final bids. So I mean, I think, it's something a little bit different than that.
Yeah,
Process brings us to, price competitiveness, feels okay, but this is different than, kind of, I mean, I guess it's how it was designed to be able to end up in this spot and not have us be disappointed, but I'm just a little nervous about saying that publicly.
We can take a look at that. I think the intention was to say that the process was intended to make sure that we had competition.
Yeah.
And at this point, 5 weeks short of our original goal, I think we can all say with confidence that we have achieved the competition that we desired.
Right. So maybe that is, strong competition has taken place, or
Yeah.
strong competition comes to conclusion, or something like that.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Good. My question on the next page is, previous page, any of those dates now, would you anticipate any of those sliding forward?
Well, I think we'll want to talk to CH2M Hill, and they, depending on their submittal on July 30th and how complete it is and how many questions we have, it may be possible, we don't know yet, to maybe move up the request to the board to authorize us to enter into final negotiations sooner than the September date that's currently planned. So as we learn more and we get a sense as to the adequacy and completeness of their submittal, that may be a possibility. Okay. So just wanted to cover project cost real quick. At the April meeting, you might recall that we provided a revised total capital cost of $234.75 million. That's changed a little bit, and I wanted to show you that and explain why. The new number is $237.22 million. The reasons for the cost changes are detailed on this slide. We've had an increase in the agency portion of the intake facility cost of $2.3 million. About $900,000 of that is the engineering services and construction management cost that we thought were going to be fully paid by the grant, but what we've been told is that for the agency's portion, which is about 20%, that we have to pay for 20% of those costs. And the other significant increase is a cost of $1.4 million for the crossing, going under the railroad, putting the pipes under the railroad. This estimate was prepared by the engineer who's designing the intake facility. We think the number is high, but we don't have a basis to question or challenge it, so we're using the number that they provided us. Hopefully we're right and the actual cost is less. We had the pre-designed fee for the DBO procurement that was added subsequent to our last meeting. That's actually coming out, so that cost will not be incurred. And we've included technical services to Davis and Woodland of $100,000 and raw water intake agency facility design, $395,000. Now, these last two items, because of the delay in starting the procurement and the bidding and award of the intake construction, originally it was anticipated they would get that done, and our DBO contractor would come in and put the pumps in as part of the DBO contract. Now it looks like those activities will overlap, so it's in our best interest to have the DBO contractor, have the intake facility contractor install the agency's pumps as part of their contract. So we have to do some redesign and make sure that that is properly coordinated. Those are those last two items. Bidding schedule for the intake. If we can maintain the state funding commitment in July, we will have the design completed in September. We'll go through a pre-qualification in October, November. We'll receive bids in February, and the current schedule would be to award that contract and start construction in the river in March. That would be very good timing. That's about the earliest that they'll be able to get in the river and actually start doing the work. So we'll with this schedule, be able to preserve the next construction season, full construction season for that work. Final slide is just one you've seen before. Again, awarding the design, build, operate contract in October or sooner keeps us on schedule to have the project completed in September or the fall of 2016. Be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Any questions? All right. Thank you. We have item 3, consider approval of the amended and restated agreement between UCD and the agency.
I'll handle that one, Mr. Chairman. Brief bit of history here. UC Davis has been a project participant partner in this project going back to the 1990s, and so they've been very much involved. Back in December of 2010, the agency and the university entered into what I would characterize as an option type contract to give the university the flexibility to later opt into the project at any time up to project completion. And that contract continues in effect. In September 2011, after the agency reduced the project capacity from 52 MGD to 40 MGD, that resulted in amendment number 1 to the UC Davis agreement to reallocate capacity shares and cost shares based on the reduced capacity. Significantly, the university opted to stay at their 1.8 MGD, so the amounts and the quantities were adjusted accordingly. Moving forward into 2012 and 2013, the cities continued to evaluate their needs for the initial project size, and the project size was again reduced to 30 MGD. That 30 MGD was then reflected in the amended and restated joint powers agreement that the cities approved back in February of this year. In that amended and restated JPA, the cities recognized that there would need to be a concurrent or a follow-up adjustment to the UC Davis transaction, and so that JPA agreement included a provision that directed the agency and the university to meet to negotiate a further amendment to the UC Davis option agreement, which we have worked on since February, and the staffs of the two agencies have agreed on a proposed another amendment to the UC Davis agreement. This one presented for clarity's sake as an amended and restated agreement, so the whole thing is stated. And what this agreement does is it continues to reflect the university's option to participate in the project at 1.8 MGD and continues to allow for that option at any time up to 90 days after project startup. And then the agreement adjusts a variety of project capacity shares and cost sharing tables that are reflected in your agenda packet. And those, if the university then participates, the various tables and percentages that are reflected in the UC Davis contract would then be the operative percentages to address the relationship among the three participants. If UC Davis chooses not to opt into the project, then the percentages in the amended and restated JPA would apply. So now we've got both roadmaps established. Staff's been through these, the agreement and the tables, and we recommend approval of the amended and restated agreement. Any questions?
Move the item.
We have a motion.
Let's see, we probably want to see if there's any public comment, but
I'll second it, then
yeah, I'll second.
we have any public comment? Seeing none, been a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Carries.
I just want to thank the board for and staff for continuing to work with the campus as we work through our internal process, and really appreciate the flexibility you've given us, and we hope we can continue to be a good teammate.
You guys are kind of testy. You know that, huh? Testy.
I'm banking on it.
That's it? Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're on the budget.
There we go. Okay. So I just a brief presentation on the budget for the board. You'll recall at our April meeting we presented a draft budget for your consideration. This is the budget summary that was provided in your April packet. There's been a few changes since that was presented to you, so I wanted to highlight those for you this afternoon. The revised budget that's in your packet has a total cost of $32.15 million. This is about $4 million more than what you saw in April, and let me explain the changes. Agency administration was not changed. Program management, we've added $20,000 of additional monies to coordinate the quality assurance, quality control efforts during the construction. Agency has decided that we are going to go out with an RFP to procure those services. They will complement the in-house inspection and quality assurance that CH2M will provide. This will be more of an oversight role, and this $20,000 will be to coordinate the efforts with the existing program management and design reviewers. We've eliminated chlorine-chloramine mixing study. As part of our reviews of the initial concept submittal, we've determined that chloramines will not be needed, so we don't need to worry about the mixing or the interaction of chloramine treated water with the existing chlorine-treated wells. And we've moved the aerosol study and the funds for the energy consultant services from the last fiscal year into the next fiscal year to reflect a more updated schedule. So the costs don't increase, it's just a timing issue. Water rights, again, we're working on a supplemental environmental impact report for the ASR program, and that has been delayed, so we've moved the money from the current budget to next fiscal year budget. We've added $20,000 for environmental assistance and help with our SRF applications. We are finding that both the Health Department and the State Water Resources Control Board, a big part of their review process involves environmental compliance and insurance of permits, so we've added that money. And then we've been asked for the supplemental water supply projects for those projects that relate only to Woodland's efforts to develop their ASR program, specifically at Well 28, that those be contracted for separately and not as part of the agency contract. The biggest change, and probably 75 or 80% of the increase, is the land and right-of-way acquisition cost. We've moved $3,081,000 from last year's budget to this year's budget. In looking at that more carefully, the decision was that if the agency board acts favorably on the recommendation today, that would go into escrow, and we wouldn't actually transfer the money until escrow was closed, and that'll take place after July 1st. Similarly, for the value for money study, which we discussed earlier, that is the current schedule suggests that the money will be spent next fiscal year, not this fiscal year. We have the pre-design fee of $250,000 in the budget, but again, as based on our previous discussion, that will not be needed. And we've updated our DBO procurement costs. These are relatively minor items for construction, a net increase of $268, but what we had failed to do in the April budget that we presented you was to reflect the additional 10% reduction in the maximum price for the DBO contract, so we've reflected those in the budget that you have before you this afternoon. And we also talked about the increase in the agency's allocation of the joint intake costs, the work associated with the increased costs for the pipelines under the railroad and the redesign of the intake and who's putting the pumps into that facility. This is a quarterly breakdown. Again, the total annual budget is $32 million. A very large portion of that is construction, $22.4 million. That assumes that we get going on both the intake and the design and construction of the regional facilities with the design build operator in the next fiscal year. This is a summary of all of the contracts that are supported in the budget. For your information, several of the ones that require board action are on a subsequent agenda item this afternoon. Others, the contracts are ongoing, and appropriate amounts have been budgeted as shown here and included in the overall budget. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on our proposed FY14 budget.
Any questions? Any public comment on this item?
Actually, can I go maybe back quickly?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, Dennis, on the prior item, the really the prior agenda item, but I'm wondering if it connects over here on the 1.4 million changed estimate for the trenchless undercrossing that had gone up. When do we find out when that might come back down if we think that it's an overestimate?
When we actually get our bids, so that would be in the January, February timeframe.
Okay.
It would be reflected in the actual bids that we get.
So do we that number, that 1.4 is reflected in the construction estimate for this budget?
Yes.
That $22 million figure, something like that?
Yeah, the portion that would actually be
in 13, 14.
Cash flowed in 14 is in there, yeah.
Okay. All right. That's all.
Okay. Did we get a motion and a second on this?
I'll
move it. Second it.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry,
Motion
Phil.
been moved and seconded to approve the budget. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. On to item 5. These are the 3 agreements with Woodland.
Yes, this is also my item, Mr. Chairman. And just to help explain the item to the board, at the start of the meeting I left this one-page map. It's actually a aerial photograph at your place. And this is a page from your agenda packet. It's actually the last page of the agenda packet for item 5, but it's a nice aerial photo that helps put these 3 transactions into context. There's 3 contracts that are proposed between the agency and the City of Woodland. The City of Woodland approved the agreements at a Woodland Council meeting earlier this month, so 2 of you are probably pretty familiar with the 3 contracts. But briefly, the 3 contracts are these. Contract number 1 would be a real property purchase and sale agreement for what's labeled here the agency facility site. This is the site that would be the future water treatment plant site. It's also the location at which the City of Woodland in a project earlier this year, last year, did a project, the site fill project to bring that land up out of the floodplain. The city of Woodland owns a lot of property in the area here. They own that city treatment, the city storm pond property, and then to the south they own the wastewater treatment plant facility. So the second agreement is an easement agreement that provides for, to the extent possible, we've tried to locate pipelines and access roads on lands already owned by either a city or the county to minimize impacts on private property. So the second agreement is an easement agreement that provides for various easements for raw water pipelines, treated water pipelines, and access roads to and from this treatment plant site. The third agreement is what we call a pond and road maintenance agreement. Because of the unique location of the treatment plant and other City of Woodland facilities, it was important for the city and the agency to work out an understanding about how, first of all, how this city storm pond in the short term, the agreement would provide that the agency maintain the city storm pond. What we did with the site fill project is the site fill, the dirt for that project came from that location. So we have lowered the land in that area. As a result, there's going to be more groundwater intrusion into that basin and potential nuisance problems, and water may need to be pumped out. So for an interim period until the City of Woodland does its planned stormwater detention project, the agency has agreed to maintain that storm pond area. There's also provisions in that contract that allow for the contractor to possibly use other land, City of Woodland land, for during course of construction purposes. And then the second part of the road pond maintenance agreement deals with the roads. The east-west road labeled city roads, an existing road. It's an existing private city road that accesses the wastewater treatment plant. The north-south road labeled agency access road would be a new road constructed by your DBO contractor to access the future treatment plant site. The agreement lays out a fair and equitable arrangement regarding the design, construction, and improvement of those roads and the future operation and maintenance of the roads in what we think is a satisfactory, equitable arrangement between the city and the county. Cost-wise, the price for the water treatment plant is the sum of the appraised value. The appraisal was before the site fill project, so it's the appraised value plus the site fill costs, and that results in a $2.9 million price. You'll note that in the slides that the general manager just went through, that the final site fill project costs were a bit more than that. They were 3.0 something million. We're leaving the purchase price at 2.9 million because that was the price in the contract approved by the Woodland City Council, and that simplifies things. However, I want to acknowledge for City of Woodland that we recognize that there's this additional cost, and that cost will be reconciled at year end pursuant to the joint powers agreement as the finance people go through the various costs to credit and debit the various city costs. That excess cost by Woodland will be recognized and reconciled through that process. The easement price is $42,000 total. The engineers did a kind of a cost survey on comparable easement prices. We tried to avoid the cost of a full appraisal because of the relative low value of these easements, but we wanted to pay fair value. So the city and agency staffs have agreed that that's fair value for the easements. And then the road maintenance agreement, there's no purchase price for that, but there would be ongoing maintenance costs that the agency would share with the City of Woodland. So agency staff recommends these three contracts, which have been approved by the Woodland Council, be approved. There's a resolution in your packet that would approve all three agreements, and we recommend approval of the resolution. Any questions?
Questions? Public comment on this item?
Move the item.
Been a motion?
A second.
And a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 6. And I think before we move to item 6, I just want to point out that there was a significant cost savings for the agency in this entire process of purchasing this this new site and filling it ahead of the DBO process. And I just want to acknowledge that again, that we saved, we believe, millions of dollars in that process. Item 6, Dennis,
Yes,
you want to take these?
Yes, this item 6 is a four-part recommendation. Involves recommended approvals for task orders that are needed to continue the work in accordance with the budget that was just approved. The first 3 are task orders for your program management team, West Yost, Kim Floyd Communications, and Environmental Science Associates. In the case of West Yost and Kim Floyd, their current task order expires at the end of the fiscal year. So in order to keep them working, we're requesting that the board approve the task orders in your packet this afternoon. The fourth one is task order number 5 with Montgomery Watson. This reflects the agency's share of the joint costs with Reclamation District 2035. Primarily to make the design changes that I mentioned earlier, specifically having the plans and specifications revised so that the intake contractor installs the agency's pumps and related equipment. There's also provisions in there for the Montgomery Watson team to incorporate SRF submittal requirements and compliance with SRF requirements. I would be happy to answer any questions the board might have on any of those items.
Does the board have any questions? I know we've all had these to study. Any public comment? Seeing none,
Move the item.
been a motion.
A second?
Item's been moved and seconded to approve task orders 7, 3, 5, and 5. Items 6A, B, C, and D. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll move to item 7.
Yes, as mentioned in the previous presentation, as a result of our communications with the Design Build Operate teams, another number of questions and requested clarifications and changes were identified to the RFP. You've been provided with an electronic copy of the actual document. It's about 200 pages. And Jim Yost is here to summarize the changes if you would like.
Anybody,
No, thank you.
anybody at the board level wish any further explanation?
No, thank you.
You gave us too much to, I mean, there's a lot of reading this go around, Dennis. I guess that comes from postponing some of this till this meeting and not doing the last meeting. Any public comment on item 7? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for a motion.
I'll move it.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve addendum number 2 to the request for proposal process. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Item 8.
Yes, as I mentioned in my previous presentation, we have submitted an initial application for the Clean Water SRF loans. In order to continue that process, the State Board staff who administers the program has asked that we complete the 3 resolutions that you have before you. Basically, they designate me as the appropriate representative for signing applications and taking other actions associated with the process, pledging revenues, and then a compliance with internal revenue code provision, all designed really to make sure that the agency will seriously consider, is serious about considering and potentially accepting an SRF application should it be offered. So we're recommending that the board adopt those resolutions to allow the process to continue.
Well, we're serious about the SRF funding. I want to thank you and staff of both cities. We've had significant significant work done, I think, by staff in both cities on this SRF funding. This would be a huge piece, and we're anxiously awaiting the day when we can announce that funding in an official way. Any comment from the public on that item?
Move the item.
Seeing none, it's been moved
Second.
and seconded to approve the resolutions regarding the SRF funding as stated in the board packet. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Thank you. Item 9, Mr. Shanahan.
Yes, sir, this is my item. It's that time of the year. The Joint Powers Agreement provides that the agency board of directors will annually change the board chair and board vice chair, and it further provides that those positions will switch out year to year between Woodland and Davis. So for the 13-14 year, the chair should be somebody from Woodland, and the vice chair should be somebody.
Davis.
Yes, I had
Chair
that
should be
backwards.
someone
Thank
from
you.
Davis.
Yes, it's right there in front of me. Chair should be somebody from Davis, and the vice chair one of the directors from Woodland, and obviously staff does not have a recommendation.
Can I make a motion?
You may.
I make a motion that Mr. Corvoza be the chair and Mr. Marble be the vice chair.
Been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Very good. Item 10, we've already taken under consideration. Joe, if you just make note of those 2 changes in the board calendar.
Yep.
And that'd be great. And then we're on to item 12, Technical Advisory Committee comments. Anybody from the technical committee have comments? Greg or Herb?
The City of Woodland is looking at our current water use as we wait for the surface water project to come on, and we are doing a public education outreach for water conservation to try and voluntarily reduce our use, and this is based on the impacts of nitrates we've had on several wells. We currently have 3 wells down due to nitrates, and also the lowered water table. We started the year off not over 9 feet lower than we did last year, so it's more difficult to pump water. In addition to that, the water tank, which is an integral part of our program for the surface water project in the city, is currently out to bid. Bids will be opened on the 28th, and we will be reviewing those bids and bringing that back to council in a future council meeting. And also our treated water delivery trunk lines is currently being prepared for bids. That's all I have. Thank you.
With respect to the City of Davis, we respectfully suggest that the City of Woodland look at an innovative rate structure in order to encourage conservation. I'm teasing.
I don't know.
We are also looking at another supply optimization to incorporate the reduced demand from the treatment plant, and we are going forward with our optimization plan as well.
Well said.
All right.
Chairman Marble,
Anything else from this August body?
I did have a note that there was an interest in public comment on item number 10, if the board
okay.
would like to consider that.
Chairman Marble,
Glad to have you here. Just
my pleasure. In the December 20th meeting, you considered and talked about going forward with the value for money study by Raftelis, and there hasn't been any activity on this. And in looking at the long-range calendar, I think it would be very good to know what the status of that is. So, as a member of the public, wanted to suggest that that might be something you want to put on your long or shorter range calendar. Thank you.
We've discussed that here today, and take that under consideration. Any
No, actually a very good comment. It should be on our calendar.
Yeah.
And we'll put it on.
Good.
Good.
Thank you. We didn't have you state your name and where you're from, but we probably should do that for the public looking at the...
Matt Williams from El Macero.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, anything further from the technical committee? Anything further from the board? Then we'll adjourn till our July meeting.
Very good.
Thank you, everyone.